Hey everyone, this is Teresa from Base 10 Montessori, and today I want to show you how to do multiplication with the stamp game. Now I've made two other videos with the stamp game. The first one is the introduction and addition with the stamp game, both static and dynamic addition. And the second video was subtraction, both static and dynamic subtraction. And today we're going to do multiplication. And as you've heard before, my favorite is division. So after this video, we're going to do some division, which is my favorite. But today, we're going to start with multiplication. And right here, I've written down an operation. We'll start with this first one of 1,212 times 3. So like I've stated before in the stamp game, this is in Montessori, this is where we give our language for the operations. So we're going to tell the child that this top number right here, the number we're going to build, that's our multiplicand. And if you're like me, that is a really hard word to say. So I have to practice really hard to say it correctly. So here's our multiplicand. That's going to be the number we build. And then this number is our multiplier, and that tells us how many times we're going to build that top number. And if you are following along with the Montessori curriculum, you know that the child has already experienced multiplication in the golden bead system. But if you're just coming to the stamp game for the first time, you might want to go back and give the child a reminder of what multiplication is, or tell them for the first time what multiplication is. So, what is the definition of multiplication? Well, the definition of multiplication is when we have the same number and we join it together 2 or more times. That's multiplication. So we're going to join it together multiple times. And when we do that, we get our answer, which is going to be the product. So when we take a number and we build it multiple times and we join it together, we get our answer, which is the product. And right here, when we want to show a sign for multiplication, we're going to make this symbol right here. And what does it look like? It looks like an X. So that is our sign for multiplication. So we're going to go through that with the child, give a reminder of the definition of multiplication, or give the definition for the first time if you haven't done the golden bead system, and then give the language for the different parts of the multiplication operation. And now I'm going to start showing you what it looks like to actually do the operation. So let's see here. We've got our units. How many units are we going to build? Got 2 units. 1, 2. How many tens? 1 10. How many hundreds? 200. And I like to keep it fairly small for the first multiplication. Multiplication, when you start getting into the really big numbers, sometimes I even have my students work on a rug or on the floor because those multiplication problems can get very big. If you're joining together, if you're doing dynamic multiplication and you start joining together a lot of numbers, you run out of space on the table. So I often have my students do this one on the floor when it gets a little bit big. If you have a larger table, that might work. And what's our thousands? 1,000. So here we are. We've got, oh, I need to go get my ruler for this. I really like my ruler for this one. All right. Got my ruler. So now we've built our number 1 time, but how many times do we have to build it? Let's look at our multiplier. This is going to tell me how many times I have to build this top number. How many times are we going to have to build it? 3 times. So we've built it once. Let's put our ruler here just to divide up our number so that we can see how many times we need to build it. So now we need to build it again. So we're going to do the exact same thing. Let's build it a second time. And again, just keep it really simple for that first problem. I like to use a multiplier of 3 often because when you do a multiplier of 2, it might look too similar to addition, and I like it to look a little bit different. So a multiplier of 3 is usually a good way to start, in my opinion. Maybe other people have a different opinion, and if you do, please let me know what you like to do for a first multiplication operation when you're introducing it with the stamp game. All right, so we've built it once, we've built it twice. How many times do we have to build it? 3 times. So we have to build it one more time. Let's do that. So I really like using the ruler for this, and I would encourage you to use a ruler because especially if children have skipped the golden bead system, or if they don't have a really good sense of order, that ruler can help them organize their work. And a lot of the times, if you haven't had the Montessori experience previously, and you don't have that sense of order built up and you haven't taught them how to organize their work, that ruler can really help them, give them a visual cue of how to organize their work. And organizing your work is a big part of learning. So now if your child is in the second plane of development, which is ages 6 to 12, they might not have so much of a sense of order. They're not in that sensitive period for order very much anymore. So it might be a little more difficult to get them to organize their work for multiplication. And if you're noticing that, just help them keep going back to organize their work, but it is going to be a little bit more of a struggle probably for children in the second plane. In the first plane, I would introduce this probably around the age of 5.5. They still kind of have that sense of order. They're still going through that sensitive period for order. And so organizing their work is more important to them. It doesn't happen quite so much in the second plane. So if you're struggling with that, if you have an older child and they're not organizing their work like this, just understand, that's kind of part of the stage that they're in, if they're in that second plane, and just kind of help them organize it. But if they get messed up, if it's not being organized, then they're going to have a really hard time seeing this multiplication, right? You want to show them it's the same number built multiple times. So that organization of work, really emphasize that with the stamp game if you can. Like I said, I know it's a struggle with some children. I know that's hard. Just keep coming back to that. Keep encouraging them to be patient with themselves, be patient with the material, and spend time building that work in an organized manner. Because organizing your work, no matter what age you are, even if you're in college, being able to organize your work, especially for students who are dyslexic, figuring out how to organize your work is a life skill. So this is a great place to start with getting that understanding of organizing your work. So now that we've built it 3 times, what's the next part of multiplication? We have to join it together. Now, this should look familiar to the child, right? We're going to start joining it together. What does this look like? Well, it looks like addition, doesn't it? Because now we're going to join it together, and this part should be very familiar. You can straighten this out. If you're a primary teacher, you're probably still stuck in that sense of order period like me, and you like it nice and straight. If you're a second plane of development teacher, you probably maybe not care so much if it's straight or not so much. They tend to say that whatever age group you get trained in, that's kind of where you function as a person. So if you're a primary teacher like me, you do tend to really like that sense of order. And maybe if you're trained in the second plane of development in Montessori, maybe you don't like a sense of order. All right, so let's get back to finding the answer, which we call the product in multiplication. So let's count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3 tens. 3 tens is what? How else do we say that? 3 tens is 30. If your child is still having trouble figuring out the language of the tens, I'll try to sing it for you today. There's a little song, but I have to admit, I still have a little bit of a sinus infection. It might sound really silly, but there is a song you can sing. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. There's my sad singing for you today. I don't have a voice. I'm very sorry I subjected you to that. But there are little songs you can sing. Try to get them to do the language of the tens. It's really easy to count 1, 10, 2 tens, 3 tens. But by the time we get to the stamp game, they really should be using the language for the tens. So 3 tens is 30. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 600. How many thousands? 3,000. So let's tell our story of multiplication. We started out with 1,212. We multiplied it by 3, and we came up with the answer, which we call the product, which is 3,636. So that's pretty easy, right? By this point in time, it looks just like addition when we get to this point. Now, if you want to do dynamic multiplication, it really works the same way as addition. It's just that you're joining the same number together multiple times. And I'll show you how that looks just in case you've forgotten what dynamic addition looks like with this, because it's going to operate in a similar manner, right? So we've got 300. And of course, we will have done both static and dynamic addition before we get to multiplication. So we've got 2,314. And I want to join it together. Again, I'm going to work with this multiplier of 3, just because I feel like it gives a good visual as a starting number. Now, I wouldn't just go to dynamic multiplication. The child, and I probably didn't state this in my other videos, don't go straight to dynamic. Take your time with static. Go through it, make sure the child has mastered it. You'll know when they're getting bored, when it's too easy. A lot of the times when they start getting to the stamp game, if you introduce it later and they're not really into this concrete work anymore, like if you have a child in the 6 to 12 age group and they're using the stamp game as a remedial work, just anticipate the fact that they're not going to want to use materials. They're going to want to do it all in their head. And the stamp game is really just a way, if they're an older child, I would use the stamp game as a way for them to check their work. It'd be more of a control of error in that sense. But if they're a child that's still in that first plane around the age of 5.5, when you introduce this, they're really going to be interested in working with the stamps. They're going to be interested in that concrete process and that visualization of what multiplication is. So they're going to be absorbing this whole process. It's not going to feel the same as a child in the second plane, but still take the time and make sure they're understanding the process. And if you're wondering, how does the child check his work? How does he know if he's done this correctly? We don't have a control of error outside of the process in the stamp game. So when we're looking at whether or not the child is doing it right, it comes down to you observing whether or not the child is doing it right. And if they come up and they show you their paper and they're like, did I do it right? I'm not going to send them to a finger chart type of an answer system. Because if you go and look at the addition strip board, we have a control chart for them to go and check their answers. There is no control chart for this. You're simply going to observe, did they do the process correctly? Are they getting the answer? If they're not getting the answer right, where is it that they're getting confused? And usually it's here in dynamic where they have to exchange, then they're missing that exchange. So just go through, observe where they're making a mistake. If they're making a mistake somewhere, don't correct them necessarily in that moment. What I would do is either give a lesson to another child and have them observe going through that presentation one more time, and then kind of showing them the process. Because what's important here is the process. If they're making a simple mistake somewhere in the answer, but they're doing the process correctly, then you know you're on the right track. So we're looking at process and not necessarily the answer in the stamp game. So we're not correcting the answer here. We're looking at process, and that's what this is all about. So let me show you what dynamic looks like. And again, we're going to have the child work with static for a long time until we know they've really solidified the process. And if they've solidified the process, most likely they have the right answers, but you might still see a mistake once in a while, and mistakes happen. What we want is the process. That's what's important. So we're going to build for how many times? We're going to build it 3 times. So we built it once. Let's build it a second time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's get 2 more. And how many 10s? 1 10. How many hundreds? We've got 300. 1, 2, 3. And then 2,000. We've got that. We built it once, we built it twice. Now we have to build it a 3rd time. It might go off the screen a little bit. I'll try to scooch it up so you can see it. So again, 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. And like I said, it starts getting very long, doesn't it? So that's why I don't hesitate to, if you're working on the floor, try to, maybe if you have a really large board they can work on to give them a little bit more of a solid workspace. Some rooms have really big pieces of board that the children can get out and work on. And I also, with multiplication, I can, if you're doing an older age group, like in elementary, I've had some of my elementary students work together in groups. So one person will build the first number, second number, the third number. So if you have 3 kids, they can each build a number, and you can still get that group lesson in if you're doing an older group, because second plane children really like working in groups. So this is possible to do this as a group lesson. It's always a little tricky, but I would say if you're in elementary, most likely you're going to need to start presenting things in a group setting. That social aspect is really important in the 6 to 12 age group. So don't be afraid, even though in primary this is an individual work, this is a one-on-one work. But in elementary, if you're doing remedial work with this, you might have to change it up a little bit. Now, I'm not trained in the second plane of development, but I've worked in an elementary room and I've done that. It's worked well for me. You might, if you're trained in the second plane of development, maybe comment below if you have something to add to that comment or if you disagree, but that would be my suggestion. If you have an opportunity to work in a group, do it. All right, so again, we're doing dynamic multiplication, which means we're going to exchange. What happens when we get to 10? Something special happens. What's that? We stop and exchange for the next one higher. So let's count and see how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Stop. Let's check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Stop. Exchange for one higher. And when we exchange, these go back into the box. All right. What's our answer in the units? 2. How many 10s do we have now? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many hundreds? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9. So close, but we didn't have to exchange on that one. 9. I wrote it in the wrong box. This is what happens when you try to look at your camera instead of your paper. 9. And I have a nice big brace over my camera, so I can't actually really see what's going on there. 9. There we go. Wouldn't be a video by me if I didn't at least make one mistake. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Teachable moment, right? So let's tell our story. We started out with 2,314. We multiplied it by 3, and our answer, which we call the product, is 6,942. And there you go. You have just seen static and dynamic multiplication. If you liked this, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. Also, what really helps is if you comment and you share this video with others. That really helps my channel. And of course, what helps my channel even more is subscribing so you can stay tuned to more videos. So if you like what I'm doing, subscribe and share it with others, and I will see you in the next video.